In 1997, the book business, especially the children's book biz, was on the ropes. Then along came the 11-year-old wizard who lived at number 4 Privet Drive, and 500 million copies later, the Harry Potter series had forever changed the publishing industry. Jamie Broadhurst is Vice President of Marketing at Raincoast Books, the company that first published the series here in Canada, and he joins us now on the line from Vancouver, British Columbia for more. Jamie, thanks for making time for us. How you doing tonight?
I'm very well. It's my great pleasure to be here.
Let's go through just some of the facts, the background that will take us to where we are today, 20 years later, and then we'll have a chat, shall we? Here's Harry Potter by the numbers. The first book, which was called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, was published on the 26th of June, 1997, almost exactly 20 years ago as we sit here tonight. The 7 books in the series have sold more than 500 million copies. They have been translated into 73 different languages. The final book, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, had an initial print run of 12 million copies. The series author, J.K. Rowling, is the world's highest paid author. She made $95 million between June of last year and this year. And she is also the first author ever to become a billionaire. Okay, Jamie, I know a lot of people know the story behind this book, but a lot of people, I suspect, still don't. So let's talk about how it all came to pass once upon a time. How did the series evolve?
Well, it's a classic Cinderella story. And if I can, just before we go into that, to give your viewers a little bit of context, when you mentioned about the 12 million print run for the final book, in Canada, we printed just over 1 million copies. And if you wanted to think about that as a physical image, if you took every copy of that book and that print run and put it one on top of each other, 1 million books would be about 100 times higher than the CN Tower. So there were an extraordinary amount of books.
That's a lot of books.
That's a lot of books. How it all began, I think of it in a couple of key dates. 1990, J.K. Rowling is on a train heading north in England. Train is delayed for 4 hours, and as she says later, at that moment, the entire idea of this boy wizard and the 7 books comes to her, and she has this great idea for a book, like many authors do. She has a great idea, then she needs to get the book. She has to write the book, which she does. She writes the first book, and then she takes the concept for the 7 books that were to follow, and puts it in a drawer. She then has to try and find an agent, someone who can get your book published, as many first-time authors will know this experience. She tried every agent in London, all the what we call the quote-unquote super agents, the most powerful, all of who passed on the project. And she was lucky enough to find an agent named Christopher Little who was looking he needed a children's book. The manuscript came to him, and he had his assistant look at the book overnight. She came back and said, "There's something here." So he said, "Yes, we'll represent you." And then he went and tried to sell the book to all the biggest publishers. And famously, there's a dozen editors in London who will now be known as the editors who passed on Harry Potter. And the book landed not with one of the big houses, although they are very big now, but with a firm called Bloomsbury, who was a mid-sized publisher, a very recent publisher. And they said yes to the book because they had a quote-unquote hole in their children's list for that season. In many respects, it was luck. They signed the book because the acquiring editor said he took the book home to his daughter. She loved the book. He brought it back. The CEO, Nigel Newton, had his daughter read the book. She loved it. And early on, it was the children, it was young people, aged 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, who saw something in this book. So the book, then we leap forward 2 years. The book is published, as you say, the anniversary right now in 1997. It wasn't published to extraordinary fanfare. There's thousands of books get published every year.
Let me jump in there with a follow-up on something you just mentioned, because we talked about 12 million copies in this print run this year. Yeah. What about the original print run for the very first book? How big was it?
The very first print run, and it's public, was 500 copies, of which 300 went to public libraries in the United Kingdom, which means if you are lucky enough now to stumble upon a first edition hardcover for Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, that will cost you somewhere in the order of about $50,000 US. And I know this because where I am right now, UBC, was trying to put together their collection last year, and when they were trying to source one of those rare first editions, that's what it would cost you today.
Okay, well, it eventually did make a heck of a... Oh, you know what, before I get to that, I should ask you, how and where did she write the book? The first one?
Yes, well, so she wrote the book in a series of cafes in Edinburgh. As she said, she had a young child at the time, and she chose to stay with the child and entertain by telling stories and writing in cafes. That's become part of the myth, the lore of Harry Potter. She writes the book gets published, and then, like every author, that's their initial dream, is to be published, to be public. She didn't have aims of becoming extraordinarily wealthy, as you were alluding to earlier. And when the book is published in the summer of 1997, and her first public event at a Waterstones, an equivalent of Indigo store in central London, in the basement, there are 2 people who show up. And as she says in interviews, the staff felt kind of sorry for her. She's a first-time author, so they thought they would bulk out the audience a little bit, and they got up to about 12. A dozen people saw the first reading of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Well, clearly it was not an overnight success, as in all at once. So what was the spark that really lit the fuse that made it go gaga?
Yeah. Well, now you're getting at the ineffable art of publishing, and it's a bit of a black art, because these type of books, in our business, we call them breakout books. They're books that people's expectations are relatively low. Many books get published a year, but almost now about a quarter of a million books a year in the North American market. And every now and then, a certain book will take off because of the word of mouth effect. And that's what happened with Harry Potter, that initially it was a number of booksellers and librarians who saw something in the story, and again, those children, those early readers who were telling other children, and other librarians were telling other librarians. By the middle of 1997, there was enough quote-unquote buzz about this that Arthur Levine at Scholastic acquired US rights for the book for a tidy sum. And then one fan talked to another fan, talked to another fan. And in technical terms, we call this the network effect. That's what we know today because of people like Malcolm Gladwell. The challenge is, it's very hard to predict when this is going to happen. It's very hard to predict how big this will become, and it's extremely hard to predict when it will end. The thing where Harry Potter is so extraordinarily different is that this was part of a word-of-mouth effect, but it never ended. It continues, and it continues to this day.
Now, your company, Raincoast, I think did something quite unusual, in as much as, while you say it's the kids who get the credit for really making sure that this thing became big, did you not also publish Harry Potter books with more adult-like covers because you thought it would appeal to an adult audience as well?
Well, we did, along with our publishing partners, Bloomsbury in the United Kingdom, and that's something that Canadian fans will be very aware of, that the Canadian covers for Harry Potter are what we call the Commonwealth covers, Canadian and UK, with our publishing partners at Bloomsbury. In the United States, entirely different covers, entirely different fonts, and Canadian fans are ferociously proud of those covers. We did, by about halfway through the phenomena, by about 2003, we had done market research that said 20% of the readers for Harry Potter in Canada are adults who don't have children. So we in Bloomsbury said, well, that's a great idea. We should do more quote-unquote sophisticated covers with darker photographic treatments, thinking that was going to be something extraordinary. And what we found out was that, in fact, adults are perfectly comfortable reading a book that is quote-unquote a children's book when it's Harry Potter.
Right.
And so those adult covers primarily were the covers that collectors wanted to have, so that they have the entire collection. And that's something where Harry Potter really did change the industry. Now today, we estimate in the industry that a quote-unquote young adult or teen title is basically a title that will be read by anyone 45 or younger. The distinctions that we in the industry make between adult publishing and young adult and teen and middle grade, these distinctions don't really matter to readers. What readers want is a great story.
Sure. A couple of quick questions on numbers. A Canadian bestseller is how many sales?
Well, the kind of folklore is that a Canadian bestseller is about 5,000 copies lifetime.
Okay.
If you were to look, say, at the Globe and Mail list on Saturday, the best-selling title on the Globe and Mail list overall, in terms of sales that are recorded through cash registers, will be about 6,000 copies.
And how many did you do with Harry Potter, typically?
So an opening weekend for the final Harry Potters wasn't 6,000 in Canada. The first 48 hours would be about 650,000. And the final book, we estimated about 800,000 copies. It is a magnitude order unlike any other type of publishing.
Did you guys get stinking rich off this book?
Raincoast did fairly well through all of this. I will say what Raincoast, we knew that because J.K. Rowling herself said there were going to be 7 books in this series, we had to make sure, we were well aware that this was going to end at some point. Obviously, it continues because of the next generation of readers. So we never really structured our business around thinking, oh, we're going to have a new Harry Potter book every 2 years. So as a result, what we did was we took those monies from Harry Potter and we focused on logistics and distribution. As I said, laying down 1 million plus copies of a book on same day, you develop some pretty powerful skills for getting books all over the country very, very quickly. And that's become our core business today for other publishers, both in Canada and around the world.
Okay. Jamie, here's the thing that I still don't get. Who came up with the notion that young kids would buy a book that is 700 or 800 pages long and that they would make it all the way through to the end? I mean, that's just so counterintuitive. How did this work? Kids decided. So the first book, Philosopher's Stone, was not 700 pages. And when the book was assigned by the acquiring editor Barry Cunningham in the UK, he phones J.K. Rowling and says, we're going to give you an offer. And she was thrilled. And then she says timidly, I've written more books in this series. And Barry very prudently says, well, let's just wait and see how that goes. And lo and behold, it went very, very well. The book started to get longer. And I think when you ask either a librarian or a young reader themselves, what they'll tell you is that you're entering an entirely new world, the world building of Hogwarts, the world building of Harry Potter. As J.K. Rowling herself studied Greek myth in university, and one of the through lines through the 7 books is this incredible mixture of actual myth and invented myth. And my market research is my own 10-year-old son, and I asked him at the dinner table last night, why is it that you love Harry Potter so much? And as he said to me, it's the details and the scenes and the fact that you want to go to the next scene and the next scene. And so we used to create door knocker bookmarks for the final books that said, do not disturb, I'm reading. And so kids could put that on their bedroom door, and then invariably they'd spend the entire weekend reading. The books would come out at midnight on a Friday night, and these huge parties that you would hear about, the fact there were 7,000 people at Van Dusen Gardens in BC in Vancouver for the final party. The Indigo at Manulife, actually, they had to, that event spilled out onto the street. There were so many people. Those events are unlike any other book event in that at 1 minute past midnight, the fans rush in, get their books, and within half an hour, the places are deserted because people have rushed home to read, and they read all weekend. I want to also ask you about why the author signed her books J.K. Rowling instead of using her first name, Joanne.
Yes. Again, bit of publishing folklore that all the experts in publishing said, if you put Joanne Cates Rowling on the cover of these books, boys will be reluctant to read a female author. And lo and behold, what I love about all these truisms in publishing is they've all been shown to be completely false. Boys cottoned on pretty quickly that the author of these books is a woman, and it couldn't matter less to them.
Let's finish up on this, Jamie, and that is, and again, because this has been such a phenomenon, it's hard to separate fact from fiction sometimes, so you tell me which is which here. I have heard that this series alone probably created more people who became readers than maybe anything else in the history of publishing. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think it is fair to say for this reason. From about 1980 until 2000, there were studies that were coming out tracking the precipitous decline in high school reading. So the National Endowment for the Arts in the States came out with a report in 2003 that suggested less than 40% of high school students were reading literature for pleasure in the United States. And there had been this, as I said, this 20-year decline. Then Harry Potter comes out and some other things happen, the Oprah Book Club and other things. And by the middle of the aughts, we see that precipitous decline reverse. And so today, it's about 50% in the United States, and we see that continuing to increase. We continue to see the excitement and passion around young adult and teen publishing, the Stephanie Meyers, the Divergence, and other series that have come. That millennial generation has been imprinted with reading in a way that the previous generation hadn't, and that's, as a result, why I'm particularly optimistic about the future of reading.
Very cool. Jamie Broadhurst, VP Marketing, Raincoast Books, thanks so much for joining us on the Left Coast tonight. It was great having you on the agenda.
It's my great pleasure. Thanks very much.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.